Welcome back to Living Out Loud. I'm Susan Karp, the Executive Director of the Arlington Council on Aging. It's really hard to think it's wintertime. Today is the early part of January. It's been 50 degrees. I feel like I could be out on the beach, but instead I have the privilege and luxury of sitting in the presence of Evelyn Smith DeMille. Evelyn is one of the executive administrators of the Sanborn Foundation, because I tend to mutilate the rest of it. The Sanborn Foundation has been a partner with the Arlington Council on Aging since 2000.
Since 2000.
Since 2000.
March of 2000.
March of 2000. So we're looking at 16-year relationship. And Evelyn, I would like to just really turn it over to you to have you talk to us today about the Sanborn Foundation and all that you do. And then we can talk back and forth about the partnership with the Council on Aging. So Evelyn, welcome. Appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you, Susan. I am very glad to be here. The Sanborn Foundation is a wonderful gift to the town of Arlington and the residents of Arlington. It was established in 1998 by a probate court judge in Middlesex Probate Court.
Really?
It is unique. There is not another agency or organization like the Sanborn Foundation in the state of Massachusetts, and I don't believe in the whole country. Our mission is to assist Arlington residents who have cancer to get the things and the services they need. And there are many ways that we can help with that.
Now, Evelyn, I want to interrupt just for a moment because with you being on my program, Living Out Loud, Council on Aging, many folks listening today might think it's just for those that are 60 and over. And just to reemphasize, it's for all residents in Arlington.
Yes, it is for all residents, and even the rides that you give to people in Arlington are for residents of all ages, as you know, and that's again one of the confusing things, because people tend to think because it's the Council on Aging, it's only elderly people that can get this rides. And I say every time I talk about it, regardless of age, the person is eligible for these rides, and that's what we are. Thankfully, just because cancer does tend to be a disease that, you know, is more prevalent among us, the people, as we age. There are more elderly people who are clients than younger people, and I say that very seriously. It's not very often that we have children or youngsters who are clients receiving benefits. But when a young person does have cancer, it is very, very stressful for not only the individual, him or herself, but for the whole family. And again, that's one of the things that I say all the time, is that cancer is a family disease. It doesn't just affect the person who has the diagnosis.
Right, and it also seems like it's become, in some diagnoses, a chronic disease.
Again, that's one of the things that we say thankfully about, because there was a time when truly a diagnosis of cancer meant, you know, you were not going to be around for long.
Right.
And now there are people who live 10s, 20, 30 years with a cancer that they are still going on with. It's ongoing, and it is a more chronic kind of a situation than ever before, and that is something to be thankful for.
Yeah. As well as some of the treatments have changed. So, you know, in the idea, if you haven't ever experienced cancer before, or it's, you know, someone close to you, the old treatments used to be, you know, a whopping shot of chemo, you know, once in a while, but now some of the treatments are a series of, you could have 20 visits of 5-minute sessions of radiation. You can have, you know, 6 consecutive days of chemo. You're off a week, you're on a week. And so the idea of providing services through the Sanborn Foundation, the rides, the rides are a significant reduction of stress in the entire process. Now, certainly, our relationship is through, and I'd like to stop for a moment because I was remiss in not letting our audience know that the Sanborn Foundation has continued to be very generous in the grants that we receive to help coordinate the rides. So the Council on Aging does the coordination of the rides. So most recently, the Sanborn Foundation has granted the Council on Aging $32,500. So I'd like our audience to know that the partnership goes on a lot of different levels, but certainly with the Sanborn Foundation directing $32,500 to the Council on Aging to help coordinate the rides. So clearly the mission is being fulfilled within the Sanborn Foundation because those monies are literally for the service. So it doesn't pay for my salary, doesn't pay for any of the staff salaries. We have a small administrative fee in there, maybe of $2,000 because of all the processing that we do. But by and large, 98% of those monies go right to the individual receiving the service.
That's true, and I will say right off the bat that the foundation was established with 9 volunteer directors, and those directors really believe that the Council on Aging's transportation program, which we call the Cancer Ride, is one of the most valuable programs that we support and have been supporting from the beginning. The other most valuable program that we support is our program to give the Arlington School Department money every year to run their anti-tobacco and their sun safety awareness curriculum, because those are both programs, those curriculums, we hope, and we do have information that says that they do reduce the risk of developing cancer. Obviously, the smoking, it reduces the risk of lung cancer, and our population of young people in this town have a lower rate of smoking than in surrounding towns.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never really realized that.
Yes, actually, that is true. I mean, there are lots of things that go into that, but that is statistically reported, that in the high-risk assessment that is done in the school department in the state every couple of years.
That's great news.
We have absolutely. And, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's right.
So,
now, do you have any statistics on the cancer side of it? So if you also help fund the health education for skin cancer, I'm asking you without any preparation, I guess, but do you have any stats on the skin cancers?
I don't have specific stats on the skin cancers. And skin cancer, unfortunately, is one of the most prevalent diagnoses of cancer in the state.
Well, you know what, and that's really interesting too, because I even know with my adult children, their friends, so through that network, I hear of the melanomas, and I just shake my head. I'm like, wow, these are kids in their early to mid 20s. My oldest in late 20s. So it really hits home. I know for myself, I go once a year to a dermatologist, being blonde with blue eyes, and have my freckle check, what I refer to as my freckle check, because the early diagnosis is in everyone's interest, whether it's a breast cancer, any cancer, early diagnosis.
Prevention is the first thing, and then early diagnosis is the second.
Right, and that educational component is really incredible.
Yes,
that's it's Evelyn. That's great. It's not that I didn't really know that. I know that the Board of Health, so under Health and Human Services, the Board of Health, when the housing authorities were going non-smoking.
Yes.
That we were able to secure a grant through the Sanborn Foundation to help with the smoking cessation. Right, because that you know, when the campus goes, the housing authority campuses go, you know, no smoking. You know, I think there were 42 individuals in the different sites that. So anyway, so we were able to help. I mean, it was great. You know, the feedback from those programs were very positive. So you do work in many ways. Now we talk about education and we talk about you know, the transportation piece, but I'll let you continue on about the other things that the Sanborn Foundation helps with individuals that have been diagnosed with cancer.
Well, the full name of the Sanborn Foundation is the Elizabeth and George L. Sanborn Foundation for the Treatment and Cure of Cancer. And we've shortened that back to the Sanborn Foundation because the full name is a long mouthful.
Well, and that's why I was stumbling, because I was like, all right, do I remember the whole one, or just may I say the Sanborn Foundation? That's right.
But the primary, as far as the directors are concerned, the primary focus of what is done is to help Arlington residents who have cancer get the things and the services they need. And specifically, we can do things like help pay for co-pays and deductibles for your cancer medical care, for anything that your health insurance plan doesn't cover. There are still health insurance plans that don't provide reimbursement for things like wigs. And that can be very, very important to someone going through chemotherapy.
Well, it can, because those changes can also create isolation. And we know that isolation can then lead to frailty. And, you know, it's an awful cycle. Just an awful cycle, but that's great.
It is, and now in the situation that we have with our health care, deductibles and co-pays are going up and up and up. Yeah. You know, there are deductibles now that are every year you have to pay out of pocket for $6,000 or more before.
Yep, for those high deductibles.
Yep, so we can step in and assist to pay for those. We will pay for parking at the hospital if you choose to drive yourself or have someone drive you individually. We will reimburse for parking. There are many people who, because of their cancer, they have trouble eating, and we will give you, we will reimburse nutritional supplements for you. It's just fantastic. And I encourage people, to call the foundation. The foundation's telephone number is 781-643-7775. And I like to say I am the chief cook and bottle washer. I run the foundation out of my home, which is the second floor of a two-family house. And if that phone rings and I'm in the house, I will answer the phone no matter what time it is. And I encourage people to call and talk with me about what they think they need or how they think we might be helpful. One of the hardest things we do is keeping ourselves out in front of the residents of Arlington so they know we're here. We have a town day table every year, and we meet lots of people who say, I never knew you existed. Well, it's a hard job, but it's how we get our mission accomplished. Our mission is very important to assist Arlington residents who have cancer. And that's what I'm so happy to be here doing today. So again, I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, it really is remarkable. And Evelyn, I'll never forget, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was in my office and I was helping an individual with fuel assistance, and we were also talking about real estate tax exemption. So we're talking about a lot of different things that could help this gentleman and his wife. And something came up in the conversation that just the year before, he and his wife had experienced cancer for the first time, because the wife had stomach cancer, and how hard and challenging it was for him to get her to every single appointment. And a long-term Arlington resident. And I said, well, were you able to take advantage of the Sanborn Foundation? And it is not uncommon for individuals not to know what's available in town, whether it's services through the Council on Aging, whether it's the Sanborn Foundation, whether it's real estate exemptions, a whole list of things. And my heart broke because he hadn't heard about the Sanborn Foundation. And to listen to his story of survival during that phase, with his wife so compromised and him trying, providing care, getting transportation. And it just made me realize that we can't say it enough. And I don't live in Arlington. I have been in 4 other communities in my role as a Council on Aging, and it's phenomenal. I mean, I can't say it enough. It is in our newsletter every single week. We tend to nestle it in the transportation section of. Maybe it's not the right place to put it, but I really look to the audience to say, please, if you don't need it, fine. Share the information with someone else, because when we go through life, we tend not to know about these things unless we need it. Now, our office, for example, receives phone calls from social work at hospitals, from oncology units. So they are well in tune to who we are and how to get people connected. But there may be so we know that that's going on. We know that we get referrals through you when people find you. But if you might be able to share, how do people find you? They just, what are the sources that you hear about how people find your number, other than the phone book?
To be very honest, the biggest source of referrals, and I think to some degree the most successful source of referrals, is word of mouth. Because people who have received our services, if they find out a neighbor or a family, a relative has a diagnosis of cancer, they will in fact say, I have a very specific couple I'm thinking about right now, who one of the spouses was diagnosed with a very rare neural cancer. And the next thing, it went out in the neighborhood, the news went out in the neighborhood, and the next thing that happened was a knock on the door, and the mother of a young woman who had been a client, she was a teenager when she was diagnosed with cancer, the client herself. But the mother of that young woman was standing at the door, and she handed the newly diagnosed person a card and said, "You have to call Evelyn, because this is a wonderful organization." And it really, again, because the newly diagnosed cancer patient respected the mother, who was her neighbor, and she called, or her spouse called, and we were able to step in, and we've been assisting that family now for, I think this is the 3rd year. And this may or may not follow logically, but the Sanborn Foundation doesn't just give you one grant and that's the end of it.
Right.
If your need continues and all of the money that was originally awarded for what you needed the first time you make an application to receive funding or assistance, once that money is exhausted, if you are still needing assistance, an individual can reapply and reapply. There is no end point as long as the need is there. That's why we are here.
That's just really, that's incredible. So the process would be to reach out to you. There is an application to complete. They send it back to you. And certainly with a cancer diagnosis, you probably are able to respond in a fairly short time period.
It depends, actually. I do need to get from the individual, the person, the cancer patient, quote unquote, the client, I do need to have a letter or a statement from that person's medical care team. Generally speaking, oncologist, nurse practitioner on the oncology team that states the cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
We just need to know that, in fact, so-and-so has
That's your
this
checks
cancer.
and balances.
Yes, exactly. And then, depending on the amount, the financial amount of money that is being requested, it can be, once I get that diagnosis statement, if an individual is asking for $500, I can say, you've got your $500. That's my authority to say that. If you need up to $2,500, then I have to ask the small gifts subcommittee to approve the grant request. And there are only 3 directors that sit on that committee. I do it via email, and it tends to get turned around very quickly. However, if it goes above $2,500, then the full board of directors, all 9 people, has to consider it, and it has to be approved by a majority. And just because it's 9 people, it takes longer if you're doing it by email. I prefer to do it at full board meetings, actual board of director meetings, personally, so that I can look people in the eyes and explain what's going on and answer questions immediately. Nuance on email doesn't work very well. But we only meet, the board of directors meets only 5 times a year. So sometimes requests need to be done via email. And we do it as quickly as we can, but it doesn't happen absolutely immediately.
And the reason I wanted, as you know, with a cancer diagnosis, even though we've talked about in the good news is that it can fall into the chronic disease versus the terminal, diagnosis. Is that still it's a very anxiety-producing event.
Oh, yes.
Even though you have, your 3 or 4 new best friends, which would be, your oncologist, your whole oncology team, it's still very stressful. So the more that we can educate as a part of this process, that while it is here, this is the process, because I gotta know now. I mean, I just even reflect recently, I have a friend who has aggressive breast cancer in the family. She went through a series of exams, but for each, whether it was the ultrasound, whether it was she ended up with an MRI. So each time, it was like 2 weeks in between. And even though she herself is a cancer survivor for a number of years, that was just a very, it's just, I gotta know now. So now that we know the process, we know that the answer comes within a reasonable time period. Certainly with the transportation piece, because this is where I'd like to distinguish my role in the community, or our office's role in the community, versus when they reach you directly. So when it comes to us, we focus just on the transportation piece. So it's not, so we ascertain that it is a cancer diagnosis, and then we get the ride scheduled. So it's not coming into the Council on Aging as an application. They, so that's
They just sign up, basically.
They basically sign up. You know, it's a club that no one necessarily wants to be a part of, but it clearly is a process where you reach out into our office and we go ahead and get all of those rides scheduled. And again, you know, you can have. I mean, I reflect. I mean, many people know our van driver Donald Boudreau, who had been with us for 27 years, and through. You know, contact through Sanborn, you know, all of his rides were taken care of. I'm not speaking out of turn because he was very open about, you know, all of his rides and so forth. But it's just an incredible organization. You know, when you are stressed with that diagnosis, you want to know that you've just got, I mean, your Arlington wraps their arms around a lot of individuals on a lot of different areas. I know we all, you know, we complain about our communities regardless. I mean, I'm on the North Shore, I have my own issues, but you know, when you need help, it's there. And I am so grateful that the Sanborns thought about this when they created that foundation. It has helped thousands upon thousands of people. You have touched the lives of an incredible group in Arlington. I know you'll continue to do that. We feel very fortunate in the Council on Aging because people come to us for a variety of reasons. I mean, sometimes it's the daughter that comes for the tub chair for the parent who's recently had surgery. Sometimes it's for the individual that just is turning 65 and needs information on Medicare. You know, we always try to demystify what a Council on Aging is, because for many, they think that we're one step away from a nursing home. I always say that because until you enter my world, you don't know all that we have access to. And to be able to partner with you on an annual basis, to be able to provide, you know, all ages. So even though I'm 60 and over, in terms of where my funding and where my service constituency lies, we do handle all ages in the Council on Aging when it comes to coordinating the rides for cancer treatment. So Evelyn, we've had a number of minutes here on the show talking about the Sanborn Foundation. Can you think of anything that we might not have addressed that you want to make sure that our audience knows about?
I would like to say is that if you are suffering, either yourself or your family, someone in your family with a cancer diagnosis, if you have any questions at all of how the Sanborn Foundation might be able to help, call me and talk to me, and let's explore. We are just so lucky. And we try very hard to meet individual needs, that it is worth the call.
It is.
And you know, the process is not difficult.
You know, before we wrap up, Evelyn, I'd really like to talk a little bit about the history of the Sanborn Foundation. So can you tell me a little bit of that story?
I certainly can, and it's a pleasure to be able to do it, because I think it is a fantastic story and involves a very wise woman. In 1931, Elizabeth Sanborn died from breast cancer at Sims Hospital in Arlington. 7 years later, in 1938, her husband George died, I think from a heart condition, but I'm not exactly sure. The Sanborns lived on Lake Street in East Arlington. In Mr. Sanborn's will, he left a trust fund, and in his will he said, once all of our heirs, the Sanborn children, are taken care of and or have died off, whatever money is left in our trust should go to build a cancer hospital in Arlington. And everyone thought that hospital was going to be built up on the hill with Sims Hospital. However, all of the heirs were not taken care of or had died off until the early to mid 1980s. And when that happened, you just couldn't go building a hospital because you wanted to.
Right.
You had to get a certificate of need from the State Department of Public Health, and the State Department said, no, we don't need a cancer hospital in Arlington. There was only $5 million left in the trust fund, and you couldn't build a hospital even then for $5 million. So what happened was that 2 other hospitals in the area, Winchester Hospital and Mount Auburn Hospital, sued for the money, saying, we take care of Arlington patients who have cancer, we should get the money. And it went to Middlesex probate court. The court case lasted a few years, and in the end, the very wise woman judge who heard the case said, no hospital is going to get this money. We are going to set up this freestanding foundation that will benefit the residents of Arlington. And I have always considered that woman a very, very wise woman judge. I always pictured her with white hair and a wrinkly face because she must have lived a long time to be that wise. However, it turns out she was younger than I was.
Wow.
And I think of her now as a very wise young woman judge. She went to the Supreme Court. She just retired from the Supreme Court in Massachusetts, and I think we all need to be very grateful to the judge who established this foundation in Arlington and has allowed the foundation to do the good that it has done over, it's actually the 19th year of operation for the foundation.
Wow, so the 19th year of operation and the 16th year of the collaboration or the grant funding with...
Well, we're in our 17th year now.
In the 17th year, but that's an incredible story. So what began as the idea of a cancer hospital through a series of changes in practices and community needs, but that really is an incredible story. So it started with $5 million, and then certainly the grants are primarily issued off of the interest that has been generated.
The interest and dividends on the investments, yes.
Right. Well, that's a great story, and just a little bit of a correction to the program, on Living Out Loud, where I said, thank goodness, that the Sanborns, thought about this. Well, they thought about this, and then a series of things. It evolved, but what an evolution.
Indeed.
What an evolution.
Indeed.
Well, you know what? That's a great feel-good story. And really just to support, and again to say thank you so much. And for those that are either experiencing cancer or might know someone that has cancer that lives in Arlington, so it's for Arlington residents of all ages, do remember Sanborn Foundation. You can Google it. If you forget, you can give my office a call, because if it goes beyond the needs of transportation, we easily coordinate it with Evelyn. You see Evelyn here right in the audience. You see Evelyn, so you know it's a kind and friendly face. And I hope that you don't need the Sanborn Foundation, but if you need the Sanborn Foundation, you know about it now and you know how to track her down.
One thing that I should say, although saying it probably is not the best way to present the information, the Sanborn Foundation does have a website. The address is www.sanbornfoundation.org, O-R-G.
Well, that's great, and that should be an easy one to find. So, Evelyn, thanks. It's been great. The story and the history of the Sanborn Foundation is interesting, and certainly, once again, it's just an incredible work that goes on here in Arlington. So, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.